Grades can sometimes be deceiving, and that's the case when you look at the Sun Devils' grades against Cincinnati, where they got better than what you'd think, but it was really carried by a handful of guys.
You are Locked On Sun Devils, your daily podcast on the Arizona State Sun Devils.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Richie Bradshaw, and I will be your guide for everything Arizona State Sun Devils. A special shout out to my everydayers who are here every day, and thanks to all of you for making us your first listen of the day. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications wherever you're getting your shows. Stay in touch by following me on Twitter at RichieBrads36 and the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Ladies and gentlemen, it is once again time to get back into the grading scale. And like I said at the top of the show, they, according to my scale, which, reminder, is typical grading, 0 to 100, A, B, C, D, and F. Just like you would normally see on the American grading scale. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. However, it's really because you had a handful of players and units and a coach specifically that carried this team to a better grade than what we thought it was going to be. Let me explain. We're going to start with the offense. We're going to hop into the defense and then talk about the coaching. Offense, we break down each positional group. Defense is all three levels of the defense, and then the coaches include Kenny Dillingham and the offensive coordinator Marcus Arroyo and the defensive coordinator Brian Ward. Fair enough? Easy enough? Perfect. Let's get into it. Let's start at quarterback. Jeff Sims has to step in for Sam Leavitt as Sam Leavitt was out with a rib injury. I gave him a 74 out of 100. I feel like this is going to be a little bit controversial, so hear me out. Jeff Sims was okay, all things considered. Now, 12 of 23 passing, 455 yards. Yeah, that's, not great. That's roughly, what is that, about 6 yards per attempt, a little over 6 yards per attempt. Barely 50% pass completion. I understand that's not great. He did make up for it as a runner where he carried the ball 14 times for 53 yards. He also took 2 sacks for a handful of yards lost. I don't have it in front of me, but I would imagine he was a lot closer to probably about 65, maybe even 70 rushing yards when you give him those sack yards back. Again, I don't have the sack yards in front of me. He was really good as a runner. He was okay as a passer. Quite frankly, that's all you can ask of Jeff Sims when he's coming off the bench. And you know what Jeff Sims is. That's a really important thing to remember here. You know what he is. He's not a great quarterback. He's not this elite passer. This is his 5th year in college. It feels like his 20th. We know what he is. He comes to Arizona State. He is your primary backup. Kenny Dillingham says he came to Arizona State with the intention on starting. He didn't get the starting job. Well, here's his opportunity to kind of advertise himself. He's still not the starter. And he won't be and he shouldn't be. But I think in a pinch, you could have done a lot worse than having Jeff Sims in as your quarterback. It was fine. It wasn't great. It wasn't horrible. He was not the reason you lost. I'm doubling down on this. He was not even in the top 5 reasons why you lost this football game. So all you Jeff Sims haters out there, and there's a lot of you, including me, I'm not a Jeff Sims guy. But to all of you out there, he was not the problem in this game. Far from it. Giving him a 74 out of 100, a rock solid B. Let's go to the running backs. 87 out of 100. 87 out of 100. I'm giving him a B+. Now, normally, this performance would have given them a lot closer to an A, maybe even an A+. The team as a whole ran for 191 yards and 2 scores, both courtesy of Cam Skattebo on 40 carries. Even if you were to take away Sims' yards, That's 14 carries that you would take away, 53 yards that you would take away. Suddenly, those numbers jump up quite a bit. And it wasn't just the Cam Skattebo show for once. Skattebo, 17 carries, 75 yards, and the 2 scores. Longest carry was 16 yards, so chunk play, chunk play, chunk play. You had guest appearances from Kyson Brown and DeCarlos Brooks. Brown, 3 carries, 41 yards. He had a 29-yard run. DeCarlos Brooks, 6 carries, 22 yards. Not as productive, but you still take it. It's nice to see, and that was one of the things I called out last week, is I wanted to see more guys start to get involved and give Skattebo some breaks because you have the depth in the backfield. That's what they did, and I would tell you it was pretty darn successful. So, Richie, why didn't you give him an A? Well, it's very simple. Cam Skattebo had a fumble early in the game. Now, guys get over fumbles. It happens. Skattebo does not fumble very often. Not just that. The entirety of this game drastically changed the moment Skattebo fumbled. As a fan, you kind of sat there and you were like, oh, it's going to be one of those days. Even the team, it was the vibe. It felt like that happened and they were like, uh-oh, what are we going to do? What's next? It just felt like the entirety of this game shifted because that first drive, ASU went right down the field. They went right down the field. They had chunk plays, and Cameron Skattebo got into the end zone. You felt pretty good about the way this game was going. Second drive started okay, and then Skattebo fumbled. And from there out, the game changed. It was not the same Sun Devils team after that fumble. I don't know how to explain it. I don't know how one play completely derailed everything, but it did. Because it did, that brings this grade down. Without the fumble, I'll tell you this is probably a 95 out of 100. Not exaggerating. This was another dynamic performance from the run game. But that fumble, it felt like that cost them the game. That was on the second drive of the game, and it felt like it decided the outcome. That's crazy. I've never seen that before. Wide receiver, I gave him an 82 out of 100. I am going to knock him down to an 80 out of 100. I'm still giving him a B minus, but I am going to an 80 out of 100 now that I think about it. And the reason why is they are carried by one man, Jordyn Tyson. 6 catches, 108 yards, including a 42-yard catch from Jeff Sims. If you take Jordyn Tyson out of this equation, nothing. The only other receiver to catch football was Troy O'Mary for one catch and 8 yards. That's it. 4 players caught a pass in this game. Only 2 players had more than one catch. One of them was Tyson. The other was Cam Skattebo. This isn't great. And I know what you're thinking. Well, that's part of the Jeff Sims effect. Of course it is. Of course it is. This was not a game that we expected ASU to pass for 200, 250 yards in. But you definitely expected more guys to get involved than just Jordyn Tyson. And that's been the case all year, ladies and gentlemen. It's not like this has been a one-game thing. Jordyn Tyson is the passing game. He is wide receiver 1. And it's amazing that you have wide receiver 1, especially when you consider you lost Elijah Badger over the spring. That's a tough loss, and it's really important that you had a guy be able to step up as wide receiver 1. But when nobody can step up as wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, that's where you have a problem. And that was completely on display in this game. If Jordyn Tyson doesn't play this game, this is probably a D for me. Well under a 70. But not only did Jordyn Tyson play the game, he dominated. So having Tyson on the field was a game changer for the Sun Devils. Big time win for them, which is why he's going to carry this grade. He's one of the players I alluded to at the top of the show who carried his position group. You take Tyson out of the equation, this is a D. Instead, you got a B minus. Tight end, this is a D. 65 out of 100. I might even go less. I wouldn't give him an F. This is not good. It feels like as the season has progressed, week to week to week, we are seeing the tight end just completely evaporate from this offense. we are not seeing production from them. And it's not for a lack of talent. Shimon Mateer is a beast. We've seen nothing from Marqueston Douglas. It doesn't help that Jaden Fortier has been injured all year. They are not getting production out of the tight end position. And it's not even like the receiver position is dominated either. It's one guy. There are a ton of opportunities here for tight ends to be able to step up. They just simply haven't. There is no production from these players. One catch this week from the tight end position, Shimon Mateer, of course. One catch for 6 yards. That's it. You can't have that. You need better production from your tight ends. It's as simple as that. They didn't get it. It wasn't the biggest reason you lost, but it's the lowest grade on this grading episode for a reason. Top into the offensive line before we take a break and look at the defense. Offensive line, 82 out of 100, a B- for me. This is a solid all-around game. They had a really good day on the ground. The run game was dynamic. They knew what they were doing, what they wanted to do, and they accomplished it. And a big reason for that was the offensive line was able to get things going. Against a pretty solid Cincinnati defense. They're not great. They're not elite. In fact, I think they were like middle of the pack against the run, but offensive line did their job. Pass protection, I thought was solid. It wasn't this perfect day, but I have seen worse games out of them this year. Jeff Sims, he was sacked 2 times. He was under pressure a little bit. When you consider this is a new quarterback that they're not used to protecting for, I thought it was solid. Wasn't elite, wasn't great. I don't even know if you would say, no, I'd say it was good. I would say it was a good day in pass protection for the team. Certainly a much better game when it came to run blocking. Once again, the offensive line was not the reason you lost this game, not even close. They had a really rock-solid day. For a unit that I've brought up before, I feel like I've been a little too harsh on. I want to give them some credit in this game. It could have been a better performance, and I think it would have been a better performance if you had been able to get some more scores from guys not named Cam Skattebo, because Skattebo can score with Richie Bradshaw on the offensive line. But that's not entirely their fault. Rock solid day from the offensive line, giving them an 82 out of 100 and a B- from me. We're going to go ahead and flip to the defensive side of the ball where we take a look at the defensive line, the linebackers, and the secondary. That's coming up next. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My friends, let me tell you about our friends over at Z-Biotics. Z-Biotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your next rough day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make Z-Biotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel at your best tomorrow. Look, I didn't really know how to feel about this personally, but I was hanging out with my buddies. We were all having a get together for our fantasy football league. We were at my buddy's house. I gave it a shot, and believe me, it's the real deal. Like I said, I made it my first drink of the night. I paced myself. I felt great the next day. And normally, I don't feel great the next day. For the best result, you need to make this pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. Pace yourself, hydrate, and get a good night's sleep right after that. You're going to wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day. Go to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use Locked On College at checkout. Z-Biotics is backed with a 100% money guarantee. So if you are unsatisfied for any reason, they're going to refund you your money. No questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege. Use the code lockedoncollege at checkout for 15% off your order. I also want to talk to you about our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks, oh, it's so much fun. If you guys like daily fantasy, you're going to love Prize Picks. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars awarded in winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. It's really easy. You're going to pick more or less on 2 players with a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run the game all season long with Prize Picks. You can win up to 4 or 100 times your money as well with as little as 4 correct picks. Those picks can include receptions, receiving yards. Are they going to score a touchdown? Take a look at Justin Jefferson. Is Jefferson going to have more or less than 80.5 receiving yards? You let me know. If he gets it right, you win. Patrick Mahomes, is he going to pass for over or under 250 passing yards? Let me know. It's that easy. It's the best place to get real money sports action. Like I said, there's over 10 million users. You sign up today. You can play alongside tons of amazing people as well. Famous people like Sean O'Malley are playing. You can find them in the community picks under the promos tab in the app and view entries of some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community every week. It puts its members first. Withdrawals, fast, safe, secure. When the picks hit my pocket, I can get it back as soon as 15 minutes. Do me a favor. What you're going to do is you're going to download the app, use the code LOCKEDONCollege, and get $50 instantly when you use your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today, use code LOCKEDONCollege, get $50 instantly after you play your first lineup. That's Prize Picks. You don't need a slogan when you have this kind of fun. Wherever you're getting your shows, like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. A special shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. Let's go ahead and get right back into our conversation about grading the Sun Devils' loss to Cincinnati. Flipping to the defensive side of the ball, there's a lot to discuss here. Starting with the defensive line, I gave him a 70 out of 100. I gave him a C. Similar to the offensive line, it wasn't a horrible performance. It wasn't a great performance either. They gave up over 200 rushing yards if you ignore the negative 10 yards that Cincinnati had from kneel downs. 36 carries, 201 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 of those coming from quarterback Brendan Swarbsey. Not great. Their starting running back, Corey Kiner, 22 carries, 102 yards. Their number 2 running back, Evan Pryor, 4 carries, 67 yards, including a 55-yard long and a touchdown. They kind of had their way with you on the running in the running game, excuse me. You did get a sack. Jacob Richcon-Geica was able to get into the backfield and register his 2nd sack of the year. You take it and run. This was not a great performance from the defensive line. I have seen much better performances from them this year. I don't know if I'd say this was their worst performance. It might be, but they're still playing rock solid football. You can't be upset with them. It is what it is. These things happen. Move on, move forward. 70 out of 100. Linebacker, no better. 70 out of 100 here for the linebacker. They were completely outshined by the secondary, who we'll talk about in just a moment. The top 4 tacklers on the team were all defensive backs. The linebackers, Caleb McCullough had 5 tackles. Keyshawn Elliott had 5 tackles. McCullough had a tackle for a loss. That's about it. Other than that, Jordyn Crook had 3 tackles. Zaire Sviaseu had 2 tackles. Martell Hughes had 2 tackles. There was just no production from this linebacking core. And especially when you compare it to the week before, where the linebackers went absolutely bonkers, including Caleb McCullough's historic performance, is just disappointing. But it is what it is. This was just all around not a great performance by the defense in the front 7. It was a great performance in the secondary. And this is another unit that really carried the grade for the Sun Devils. The secondary, I'm giving them an 87 out of 100, a B+ for me. Let's start with the star of the secondary, and that's Keith Abney. Ladies and gentlemen, Keith Abney is corner number 1 on this team. He is one of the new faces of the Locked On Sun Devils podcast. We have a lot of players that we really like on this show. It dates back to Darian Butler being the original, what's the word I want to use? Our first biggest crush, I guess, on Locked On Sun Devils. That was back when we had 2 hosts on this show. Fun fact. Darian Butler was the OG. And then you've had several other guys over the years. You've had Elijah Badger come through. Cam Skattebo has been one of our big fans. You've got Clayton Smith. We're really big on him. Keith Abney is joining that group. He had an interception in this game. He nearly had 2 interceptions. He had sticky coverage the whole game. He has been impressive in the last handful of games. He is truly coming along as one of the stalwarts in the secondary and one of the most important players as your number 1 corner. He has been tested all year, and he has been asked to step up big time for this team, and he's done it. He has done it. Keith Abney's a beast. He's a monster. As long as he is back there in the secondary, I have faith in him to be able to shadow some of the number 1 receivers that the opposing team might throw at you. Once again, you had great performances from your safeties as well. Each year, starting 3 safeties, top 3 in tackles. Miles Rouser, 13 tackles, 7 solo, 1 for a loss. Xavier Alford, 10 tackles, 3 of them were solo. Shamari Simmons, 7 tackles, 3 for a loss, 3 solo, and 1 for a loss. For what it's worth, you also had LT Welsh. Your other corner was number 4 in tackles with 6, 3 solo, 3 assisted. But those safeties, Rouser, Alford, Simmons, beasts. They're leading the team in tackles seemingly every single week, with Rouser more often than not being top dog. It's time we give Miles Rouser his flowers too, because this is a tone-setting safety. My goodness, does he hit, and he likes to hit too. We've seen him been the subject of some personal foul penalties from the big hits. Some very questionable. But nonetheless, I mean, when you see number 4 in the open field, you're probably going to make a business decision. You're going to be like, you know what? I got enough yards. I'm just going to go down right here. I don't really feel like testing this dude. Xavier Alford, absolute beast. It's been wonderful to have him back in the lineup after we missed him last year. Shamari Simmons, another one of the darlings of this podcast. He's a beast. They moved him to nickel. I don't think there has been a better decision by the Sun Devils defense this year than to move Simmons to the nickel spot, especially when you consider you lost, of course, now I can't remember his name, Cole Martin. When you lost Cole Martin, who was supposed to be your starting nickel, and you plugged in Shamari Simmons, seamless. And it's been terrific having him there. He has been one of the MVPs of this team on the defensive side of the football. Overall, I thought this was a really good performance from the secondary, and they slowed down Brendan Swarzy, who has been a pretty good passer this year, but they were able to hold him out of the end zone through the air. I know he scored 2 on the ground. Through the air, they held him out of the end zone, 23 of 31 for 206 yards. The aforementioned interception, almost 2 interceptions. It's a pretty good team. They did good through the air. Not in this game. Secondary was the biggest reason for that. Pass rush didn't really get home in this game. The front 7 in general wasn't great. The secondary stepped up. Secondary was another one of those groups, like I said, that really carried the grade that ASU got at the end of the day. And we're getting closer to talking about that grade, but first we got to talk about our coaches. Coming up next, this is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. NFL fans, sports fans, honestly, you can start this season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get that hunch in the middle of game, you can check out the latest stats and view a live play-by-play and more on the same page where you place your bets. So if you've got this feeling that your favorite receiver is about to get himself a touchdown, or that your quarterback is going to hit the over on passing yards, or maybe you just want to take the money line in the middle of the game, you can do that all while paying attention to what's going on. I am also going to tell you, you can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. All you got to do is go to FanDuel.com to get started. That $5 bet, by the way, it can be anything. It can be a money line, a spread, a player prop, whatever. Place that. You're going to get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Just go to FanDuel.com to get started. Now I want to talk to you about one of my favorite sponsors in the whole world, and that is Home Field Apparel. Home Field Apparel is the premium college apparel brand based in Indianapolis with a focus on creating incredibly comfortable, officially licensed apparel with vintage college designs on more than 180 schools. That's not just ASU, ladies and gentlemen. If you are doing your Christmas shopping for someone who is not an ASU fan, go to Home Field Apparel. They probably have your school. It's products that are made by the college football fan for the college football fan. I encourage you guys to take a look at the football boxes. Those are my personal favorites, and they sell a lot of them. They're going to include 3 never-before-seen items from your school that aren't available anywhere else. Home Field also has items that are fit for any occasion and any weather condition. So whether it's 110 degrees outside or it dips into the 30s, you're always going to have high-quality merchandise to stay supportive of your school. You can shop for your team on homefieldapparel.com using my promo code ASU24 for 15% off your purchase. That code is good store-wide, not just for Arizona State. Go to homefieldapparel.com today. Get the best licensed apparel out there and more. Use my promo code ASU24 and get 15% off your order. One last time, wherever you're getting your shows, like, subscribe, turn on notifications, and you will get an update whenever we post new content. I appreciate each and every single one of you for tuning in to make us your first listen of the day. A special shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. Let's wrap up this episode with the coaches. We'll get through this nice and quick. This has been a nice and long episode. Kenny Dillingham, 70 out of 100, C-. Kenny was very inconsistent in this game. When he wanted to go for it, when he didn't want to go for it. That inconsistency was one of the biggest reasons that ASU lost this game. In the first half, and look, I understand the analytical side of football, and whether you love it or you hate it, it's here to stay. So get on board or continue to hate it. I don't know what to tell you. It's not going anywhere. According to all of the analytics going into it, Kenny was making the good decisions in the first half, but then they weren't working. So you go to the second half. Did anything change? No, nothing changed. You still had analytics that were telling you to go for it, but suddenly Kenny's not going for it? I don't know. It didn't feel like Kenny Dillingham at all. This is not what we have been accustomed to watching from Coach Dilly. It was really weird. And to talk about the drop-off, you went from beating a top 25 team in Utah in your home field. The crowd stormed the field. It was an exciting game. It was, without a doubt, the best coaching performance of Kenny Dillingham's career. I don't care high school. I don't care offensive coordinator in the SEC, whatever. This was the best coaching performance of Kenny Dillingham's career. And he follows it up with what might be his worst coaching performance. Talk about polar opposites. This was not what anyone thought was going to happen. And sure, there was a lot of factors going into the game. You were going to the other side of the country, 3 different time zones ahead. The weather was much different than what you're accustomed to. I know it was still like in the 60s. Like it wasn't like freezing outside, but it's still pretty different from what 60s is in Arizona. Things are different, and it's a brand new opponent that you've never played before. I understand all of that. That doesn't excuse that this was a bad coaching performance from Kenny Dillingham. Sometimes you're just going to call it what it is. Offensive coordinator Marcus Arroyo, I'm giving him I have a 77 here. I'm going to stick with 77, a C+ here, because I did think that this was a rock-solid coaching performance and a rock-solid game plan that he put together with backup quarterback Jeff Sims in. Ladies and gentlemen, it is not easy to have to shift everything that works for you with your starting quarterback, overhaul it for your backup quarterback. Sure, Sims and Leavitt, yeah, they're great runners. They're dual threat quarterbacks. That's where it ends. That's it. Like, I understand Leavitt has his flaws as a passer. He's a redshirt freshman. Sims has his flaws as a passer. He's been in college for 41 years. There is a drastic difference in how you call that game. And you could tell when they tried to throw the ball, they couldn't do it. They couldn't get guys involved who weren't named Jordyn Tyson. They could not connect on deep balls down the field besides that big 42-yard completion to Tyson. They couldn't move the ball underneath, intermediate, down the field. It didn't matter. But you still were able to get the most out of your run game, which included Jeff Sims and a pretty darn good performance. You just have to find a way to get more guys involved, especially in games like this. I can see both sides of it. I can see one side where you're shorthanded, so you just want to get the ball in your best player's hands, which is what they did in this game, but they lost. So maybe you take a look at the other side where it's how can we get a vast amount of players involved to change up the way the defense wants to play. Like, sure, Jordyn Tyson stretches the field, but Nocon Stovall's running underneath. Maybe I want to get Stovall involved there. Cam Skattebo is running really well. Let's change it up and let's run it with Kyson Brown. Or Raleigh. I understand Raleigh wasn't healthy. He didn't play his game. But in other games, switch it up. Have that Thunder, have that Lightning. Get the tight end involved. For goodness sake, get the tight end involved, man. There's good tight ends here. It blows my mind that they can't get more out of them. And honestly, maybe it is a tight end problem. But until we can confirm that, I think it's a scheme problem. Overall, though, I thought this was a pretty solid game plan. 77 out of 100, a C+. It could have been lower. Maybe it should have been lower. But I am giving Marcus Arroyo some extra props for what he was able to do with Jeff Sims at quarterback on a short week. All right. Last guy to talk about, Brian Ward, another one of the darlings of the Locked On Sun Devils podcast. We are perhaps the biggest fans of Brian Ward in the entire world. I have said no shortage of great things about Brian Ward, and I can sing the praises of him for probably 10 full-length podcasts. We love him that much here, which is why he gets the highest grade of this game, 90 out of 100, an A- right on the dot. Ladies and gentlemen, Brian Ward, the king of second half adjustments. They were down 24-7 at halftime. Shutout. They shut out Cincinnati the rest of the game. Second half didn't get a single point. No field goals, no touchdowns, nada. Nothing. Zero, zilch, nada, whatever the saying is. They killed it. And Brian Ward deserves 80% of the credit. Players got to execute, of course, and I will give the players their due diligence. I'll give them their flowers, but Brian Ward is the one who puts this into place. He's so terrific. You have to find a way to just keep him here as long as possible. Brian Ward cannot leave this program under any circumstance. This is why. Games that feel out of hand suddenly get a lot closer. Kenny Dillingham finds a way to be more consistent with his aggressiveness. You could have won this football game. Down 24-7 at half. You only put up 7 in the second half. You technically won the second half. If you find a way to convert on those field goals, or you find a way to just be more aggressive, things change in this game. And a huge part of that is because of the performance of Brian Ward. Before we get to the overall, speaking of special teams, I do have to mention them. Normally we don't mention them, but it would be irresponsible to not. And they get an F. Flat out. You can give them a 50 out of 100. You can give them a 40. You can give them a 0. Whatever you want to give them, I wouldn't disagree with you. As long as it is lower than 59. This was an F performance from the special teams unit. Missed both of your field goals. That can't happen. ASU has struggled all season long with special teams. They can't figure it out with anyone. Ian Hershey's not kicking well. Carson Kiefer's not kicking well. They won't even give Parker Lewis an opportunity to get out there. They are barely converting 50% of their field goals, 53.8% on the year. They have just not been good, man. They are 24 of 26 on PATs. It's not the worst thing in the world, but that makes a difference. They've got to figure it out. They had open tryouts for kicker earlier this week. When we get an update, I will let you know. Hopefully Nolan Krasinski is able to make the team. God, this was tough. This was really, really tough. It was almost like unwatchable when special teams rolled out. F performance. And I think that'll justify why I am giving them a bit lower of a grade. Because if you were to average out what I gave to the team overall, the 11 spots that we look at week to week, they got a 78 out of 100, which is deceiving because you had 3 position groups that carried the unit. Jordyn Tyson carried the wide receiver room. They end up getting an 80 out of 100. They are at least a 70, if not worse, without him. The secondary, they all pulled it together to get an 87 out of 100. That carried the defense. That had 2 70s. And then Brian Ward had the 90 out of 100, the highest grade on this team. You had a C- and a C+ from your 2 other coordinators. They carried this grade. Because you take them away, you're a C-, maybe worse. If you were to throw in whatever grade you decided to give the special teams, like I said, you gave them a 59, you gave them a 0. They are much closer to a C- in this game. And I think that a C- is very spot on for what they deserved in this game. Not the 78 out of 100. But that's why numbers can be deceiving. What did you guys think of this game? Am I too harsh? Am I spot on? How would you grade the Sun Devils? Let me know in the comments. You can hit me up on Twitter as well at RichieBrads36, the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. Wherever you're getting your shows, like, subscribe, turn on notifications, and you will get that update whenever we post new content. A special shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. And thanks to all of you for making us your first listen of the day. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a bye week, which means we have no game this week. But don't worry, we will still be here tomorrow morning because I got to let you know what games you need to watch out for. It'll be a nice, tight episode. We're going to look at the most important games in the Big 12, and we're going to look at the funnest games that are going on around the country. So I will see you guys tomorrow morning. Till then, you keep it locked right here on Locked On Sun Devils.